Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. When people are under extreme emotional distress, their language usually becomes very raw, unfiltered, even, and sometimes inconsistent. Okay. What it does not usually become is polished, symbolic, or strategically framed. In episode one of this kind of like series that I'm doing, you'll see that we established that Nancy Guthrie, this whole case does not behave like a routine missing person situation. We're going to examine something little bit more revealing of something that's like beyond just the physical evidence right now. We're going to go into the language. So, there's been several public statements have been made between the siblings, other people, and separately. Savannah has dropped, I think, now 3 videos. We're gonna get into that, but I'm trying to like pace myself because there is gonna be plenty to uncover. And as the days continue, um, for the search of her. So what I've been noticing in these public statements made by the family, there's a lot of language that's unusual for grief, panic, or fear, but very familiar in negotiation environments. So when you see or hear them say phrases like, we will pay, peace, um, she is valuable, and we will celebrate with her, these are not emotionally driven phrases. They are supposed to be intentional phrases. So, being that people speak under genuine distress, sometimes their words can be messy, emotional, and inconsistent. This is why you're seeing there's kind of like a measured, symbolic, and maybe unusually controlled way of statements or delivering statements. Okay. Now, today's video is not just about judging the family. Because I want to do that at a later point, kind of examine the relationship between these siblings. But today's going to be more about examining why these specific words were chosen and whether they suggest guidance, scripting, or even a third party involvement. We're going to break down these statements line by line, both from a behavioral perspective and through a controlled intuitive reading, obviously, to understand whether this language kind of originated organically or was it advised. Now, what will also come out at this moment, I expect to see things that are time sensitive. The second deadline for the ransom is approaching in the next 2 hours or so. So again, we're gonna have active energy in the reading, so keep that in mind. Okay. Pay attention to the words that are coming out in the cards because words matter. And in high level situations like this one, words are often the first clue that something bigger is happening behind the scenes. I've also mentioned that this specific story, I think, is being used not only as a distraction away from the other headlines that we know about, but also as a way to energize the recent Super Bowl. Gonna get that into that in another video as well. Okay, so let's talk about those public phrases that stood out immediately, like we will pay, we want peace, she is valuable. I remember in that video, Savannah, she kind of like the way she looked kind of was just so disappointing, because for some reason I thought they would have better news or they would be just in better spirits, knowing that they could just pay the ransom and maybe locate their mom in time. So for there to be all these days that pass by, and then we're met with Savannah, kind of like being the spokesperson, essentially. I think that that is also telling, and also I think a dead giveaway about the severity of the story. There was a mention of someone talking about uh ransom notes that were left to multiple news stations, but one letter in particular was addressed to Savannah, dear Savannah. Okay, so I feel like it's weird that they would isolate Savannah in that conversation if this is just about, a family internal issue. And you know how I feel like that's kind of like to throw us off, to look at Annie and to look at the brother. This is how I kind of feel, even though Annie's energy does feel off. I do feel like there's an explanation for some of that though. It could just be as simple as siblings that don't get along anymore. You know, they grow apart, they're grown, they have children. Um, Also, okay, that was so weird. Again, I've been noticing that I have a lot of like technical issues recently. I don't know what that's about. Um, but I was mentioning how Annie didn't seem to be as close to Savannah. Again, I could be misreading the body language, but she's not sitting close to Savannah. Savannah's kind of leaned in more so with her brother. And it kind of just looks like they are trying to go along with presenting a united front. Okay, so these, and even the words that Savannah is saying, while she's looking the complete opposite of how poised the words are coming out of her mouth, these words that she was saying are not like instinctive grief responses. Of course, I'm sure she wants to just say, "Oh my God, where's my mom?" Like, I'm pretty sure she's even angry because that was another emotion that I witnessed from her too. It looked like she was so distraught that it was producing a certain level of anger in her that she has to kind of like fix her face and be strong, like, and she has to talk with a certain tone, not to get too angry, like all of those things kind of go through your mind, like, oh my God, I cannot believe I have to do this. um Now that doesn't automatically mean that. So, okay, another thing about this too, because I'm trying to preface this with all the details so that people really understand, because there are a lot of people going off on different soapboxes. The grief responses are transactional, and they're meant to be that way. They're used to kind of like address whoever this third party is, and not necessarily to the general public. That's why they stand out, and that's why you can hear it. And that's part of the reason why everybody is, kind of got this ominous feeling like, oh my God, this is so strange, because a lot of people have not actually witnessed how ransoms go. Now, to some level, you see how it happens in movies, but they kind of expedite the process just to keep the plot to move along. But in real life, um you have to code your messages in order to get the attention and direct the conversation and the communication with the third party, even though you don't really have a lot of control. So um I'm saying that because it doesn't automatically mean that there's any wrongdoing happening in the background, but it does suggest some intentional messaging rather than like an emotional overflow. Okay, so in high risk situations like I'm talking about, families are often like advised by maybe like their legal counsel, negotiators, or other authorities on what not to say. So that's interesting to me because I feel like I heard someone reported that Savannah's first video with her siblings, they did that on their own. The sheriff had no idea that they were doing that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Savannah didn't consult with someone within the FBI and then they kind of like directed her, but there's some discrepancies or miscommunication between, different agencies. So that's something important to note that came up in the reading before. Okay, so the question now becomes, are these words being chosen freely or strategically? We know that they're strategic, but to do what exactly? Like, are we trying to temper the mood of a hostile abductor? Because if it's a lone person, that's one thing. But are they acting for some type of state country that we're just not aware of? And that's what the anonymity is like. That's what makes it so spooky. I don't know. So is there a gap between, oh, it's a lot going on. All right, we have three cars that just flew out. Four, actually. Um, Screenshot is key evidence. There could be a screenshot of something, or someone could be looking through a phone of some sort to get like clues. They could be tracing metadata right now. Bound and Tortured came out. Okay, I hope that's not how we find her. That doesn't always have to do with like a body. That could be something else that's found. Or I mean, I did say tortured though. Bound and tortured. Maybe that's how she was held. Okay, another thing that makes me with this bound and tortured situation and the phrase she is valuable to us. I think that that has to do with, I don't know why I keep getting a weird intuitive ping about it being like Hamas or something being masked as like Hamas or some spooky group in the background like that. Because remember how the hostages, the whole situation with the event at in the West Bank, or no, in Gaza at the concert with Hamas, right? And how they held people on both sides. So Hamas was holding hostages, Israel was holding hostages, and they've been doing these exchanges to get people back, even if they're not coming back alive. So I feel like that's the reference that Savannah's saying that, and her face dropped when she said it, almost like like they knew that their mother was not coming back and they're still having to beg. They're begging now for a dead body. How like devastating does that, sound, so just imagine. So we have files wiped clean. There could be things that are wiped. Files, I mean, this could be in reference to like someone's search history being cleared and maybe them not emptying the cookies. Um, this could also be like in reference to files or security systems that have like a cloud, maybe files of the day could be deleted or not there anymore. False alibi planted is here. Okay, so is there a gap between what is privately known by certain individuals and what has been released publicly? Because again, with the Pima County Sheriff's Office, there's been a lot of talks about them kind of dropping the ball, kind of, going back and forth with the House not securing the scene, all of that. So no, there's no telling what other levels of incompetence are within the sheriff's office and how it trickles down. Ooh, I'll always get these burps in these readings. Okay. And how it trickles down. So, um, is there a gap between what they're telling us? Of course, I'm sure there is. How far the gap is it? Are they fully aware of what's going on? Do they kind of have like their hand on the pulse, no pun intended, about maybe how to, you know, come up with a solution? But then also, this gap, I'm wondering if the gap could be between like siblings. So that's part of the reason why I kind of want to dig deep on that. Poison, liquid, or powder? This poison keeps coming out. This came out in the other reading. Feather on body. Okay, so feather on body, she could be found. If she's found in the desert, it's possible a feather could be on there. That could be symbolic. It could have, deeper angelic meanings, or it could just be as simple as like there's a dead carcass and feathers or fur fall on her. And, like, not to get gory and all that, but, I've just watched a lot of crime investigation shows. Too much Dateline, first 48, 2020. Okay, gang related retaliation. Okay, gang related retaliation. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. It's some type of group. Remember, the cartel was brought up before. There could be some connection there. It's a lot of people speculating that it could be like a Latin American kind of um what do you call it, feud or rivalry that we have, or it could be related to Israel, but Israel is just like taking the cake with all of this. Now we have back door left wide open, which that was the report in the beginning. Of course, details change over time. That's another thing too that I want to get into is like this timeline. If you guys want me to go into the timeline and we can kind of like sift through what happened at different points, let me know in the comments. I'll do a video for that. But shipping and delivery receipts. Okay, again, something with the shipping truck. Amazon trucks. a delivery, UPS, whoever. There's something significant about a shipping truck or one of those boxy looking trucks in general. Communication card is out here again. So we know that the deadline is approaching. So, like I said, we're going to see a lot of cards that pop up that have to do with that. Okay, so did the public, whoa, this flew out. All right, so this might help clarify the gap. Um, okay, objects moving, things could be out of place or things could be missing. Certain things that were there before could be gone. That could be a part of evidence. That whole contaminating the scene is kind of crazy. There's a call for an opened investigation. Okay, we already know that's happening. Mafia style execution. I'm starting to begin to feel like we're going to find her in a, like, I don't want to say it's overkill, but we either may never find her, or the way we find her is just going to be like like they did too much. You can tell that they did too much. Open and shut case. I think that's probably the direction that they would like it to go, but I think that the audience, the masses are too intelligent. There's too many sleuths out here that are like aware of what this is and what's happening, even if the details aren't all the way fleshed out. It's kind of clear that, you know, the story could get thrown off. So there's something about it being an open and shut case. There's a desire for that, but it's gonna open up the floodgates for so many other things. I'm picking up on energy of like even legislative reforms in honor of certain things that went wrong in this investigation that Savannah may be like one of the main advocates for because of her voice and her platform and all of that. Her international universal appeal is kind of gonna like help her lean into being more grounded in politics in some way. Intelligence update, there's going to be a new break. Okay, so we know that there's something coming up. Again, it's not really cause for alarm right now. Did the public statements made by the family, um how influenced were they by like guidance, counsel, or strategy? How influenced? Because another thing too, I feel like they almost trust Savannah to be able to speak. I think that first video where the sister was talking did not pan out well. And I think unfortunately our biases and prejudices and our subconscious, judgy thing. I mean, it's how we use pattern recognition as humans. So again, it's no fault to us and using our basic instincts, but it did not help that she looked disheveled. It doesn't really help that she looks like, possibly the loser sister. You know how the dynamic between like oldest, middle, and the youngest, and who ends up being like the star. Again, this is why I want to get into the sibling dynamic because there's something going on there. Even if it has nothing to do with the case, even if Annie is again innocent. Okay, so I was questioning something about like the public statement. I forget what I said, but anything about the family's public statement. We have I saw it coming. Media scrutiny escalates. Okay, so there could be some discussion that happens with even like the public is going to turn on each one of them. The brother looks like the perfect scapegoat at some point too. You know how these cases go, it's like they go down the list of all the family members, they start turning, and at some point I'm pretty sure they're going to blame Savannah and say she wasn't talking confidently enough or she went off script and whatever, it's going to be something. But there is some type of media scrutiny here. This could also just be about the investigation in general, about the lack of preservation of the crime scene, but also just the use of resources. Okay, we have the roommate card here, so someone within the home. I won't just say it's a roommate, but it's someone within the home or like someone's home, not necessarily Nancy's home, but someone who frequents the residence or a residence. Unacknowledged ancestor watching. Okay. Okay, so we getting into the part where it's like definitely some passed over energy. Nancy is gone, gone, gone. Shit, you know what is so crazy? When I did the reading, they're gonna be able to know all the time and death too. But then I wonder if some of that changes with the desert. You know, it gets cool at nighttime sometimes, right? But I don't know how cool it gets in Arizona. So there could be some mummification of Nancy if she's found. Hopefully, that's not the case. But you know how just decomposition goes in dry, hot spaces and then it gets cool. So you know what I'm trying to say? Distraction case. Okay, so again, this is a distraction case. There's something about a jealous coworker. Numbers and timestamps are super important. So again, that's gonna be my next one of my next videos is we're gonna peel back the layers of the timeline because there's something about that. All right. So I do want to clarify this with the conspiracy deck because sometimes the conspiracy deck kind of gets like very, intricate. Soul chose this death. Okay. So in other news, Nancy, this came out before. She came to terms with whatever it was. Disassociation during trauma. She could have blacked out at one point. Was Nancy aware of a real or perceived threat prior to her disappearance? Was she aware of the threat? We tried to cover this yesterday, last night. It was like really early this morning, but um there's so much going on. Specific smells or perfumes, manipulative mastermind. Okay, so if the smells, specific smell or perfume. Somebody could have a very specific smell or perfume, but I'm also just picking up on this being like her being able to smell or sniff something out. She could sniff out a manipulative mastermind or some type of weird plan. Something about that. Okay. This could have something to tie into the motive without really accusing people. So, that's part of why I think the language in how they spoke is significant too. Justice is coming in a strange way. Okay. All right. Is the timing of information release being influenced by coordination or risk management in the next 72 hours? Oh gosh. So we could get something in the next 72 hours. I hope we do not keep having to wait. Like, not to say I hope they find the body tonight, but it's like, oh my God, like how much longer? This story cannot, this reminds me of like, I don't know why this makes me think of like the fires, the California fires, how it just never seemed to end. Um, all right, so what I am seeing here is that it's important not to judge the family. It's recognizing that language reflects circumstance. So when the communication kind of feels managed, it usually means the situation itself required some form of management. All right. So this reinforces what we already established in episode one. Nothing crazy. The public framing may be incomplete as far as we know it right now, but I'm sure something will drop once we hear from Cash Patel at 5 p.m. Hopefully not false, but it could be, insufficient info that they are leaving out. Now, in episode three, I'm going to move away from the language and get into the procedural kind of efforts, specifically the handling of the home and that timeline irregularities that we've been picking up on. Okay, so that's where intent becomes harder to obscure. Everybody has to get their story straight. There was something that came out last night about a person and their statement or withholding something. Go back and listen to it. If you're following this case in real time like me, subscribe and turn notifications on. This is going to build on each other, each episode that I do, and missing one kind of breaks the chain. So I'm trying to bang them out as best as I can. So we'll continue next with the evidence that doesn't behave the way that it should. All right. I love you. I will see you in the next one. Bye.